Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life, control your life.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the 817 podcast, episode 2 with co-host and resident Tony Hernandez. What's up, man?
What's happening, man? Good to be back. Glad I'm still invited to be a part of the 817.
Hey, man, I think you lifted some viewership. Look at you, making it rise.
Gosh, so flattering. Thank you.
Well, really excited today, guys. We actually are having an interview that me and Tony did on Thursday with Mattie Parker. We were really excited to interview her as she's a mayoral candidate of the 10. There was 11. I think someone already resigned. But we had Ann Zeta. We're now having Mattie Parker. We're looking to have Deborah Peoples later on as well. So this pod is going to end with our recording with Mattie Parker about her race and her run, and so we're really excited. It was an awesome interview. It was really good.
Absolutely, stick around. Even if you're going to fast forward over my voice, make sure you get to Mattie Parker. It's a really good interview. I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to you guys listening to it.
And then at the end, we do our takes of the interview. What we do, as you guys know, how torn we are about the upcoming election, how lucky Fort Worth is to have so many talented people running for mayor. But let's get into the news. And honestly, we're really excited that we have Mattie as this interview, because this kind of was a slow news week due to maybe a little bit of spring break. Yeah. Maybe that it's a lot of like, holy snaps, a lot has happened. So because maybe life is nice, the weather's nice, things are calm, spring break is here. It just feels a lot more cool and at ease.
Yep.
So the news wasn't that, a lot to talk about.
I think, I agree with all of those things. It's a collective deep breath, deep sigh for everyone. We're just playing catch up with all of those things. I think that a lot of what we read in the paper was kind of reactions to things that we had already heard about and big stories that you mentioned here. So I'm okay with it, honestly. But I do know that, one of the stories that got everybody's attention from a national standpoint was the stimulus bill that went into effect.
Or if you're under 30, the stimmy.
Yeah.
That's what the cool kids say, right?
I know. I can't keep up. We make up so like everything. It's like, the stimulus bill. It's like, you mean the stimmy? I can't keep up with everybody. I'm not cool anymore. I haven't been cool in years.
Let's. I did watch Joe Biden's open remarks to the public, his first one. Very thoughtful, very sincere, and I think we obviously know it was no. All Democrats voted yes, Republicans voted no. So that means our House of Representatives did not vote for it. There was a story in the paper on Thursday about our Fort Worth candidates opposed the COVID relief package. Mm-hmm. You had a lot of good thoughts on this and really dialed in on this article.
Yeah, there's so much here. Here's what I'll say. I want to start by saying that there were a lot of really interesting points that I should do a better job of going back and researching and doing some more homework on all of the points that were made. But I think that there's a lot of unpacking here to do. One of the things that these representatives talked about were they didn't want to vote for it because only 9% of the funds in the stimulus package go to directly combating the COVID-19 virus. I think that's relevant. I think that's legitimate. Yep. But again, I don't know all of the ins and the outs of that. There was also questions around whether or not this is a good time to do a third stimulus package because so much of the money hasn't been spent from the previous packages. My educator brain immediately clued in on this idea that, $68 billion have been allocated to education in our country and only $5 billion have been spent. So, and yet we're about to pass another set of funds.
That's $125 billion.
Right. And so, I definitely hear where some of these representatives were kind of like, well, what's the plan? What are you going to do with that money? And so much of that money isn't going to be spent until 2022. There's talks in this article that some of that money may not be spent until 2028. And I think they're valid questions around what we put in the package, whether or not it was, the right move to pass it from that kind of macro level. Beth Van Dyne was quoted saying that it was unacceptable that 95% of the funds haven't been used, right, up to this point. So it just left me with a lot of questions. It left me with a lot of questions about what the plan is for the money and how the stimulus package will impact education nationwide as a whole. And then, of course, on a micro level, I'm selfish and I'm thinking about the 817. I'm thinking about the state of Texas. I wonder what is going to happen with some of those education dollars here at the state level and when we're going to see the impacts of it.
Yeah, and I think what like a lot of the conversation is, oh, why did we need another stimulus bill? And what people have to understand, like, I actually think what's crazy is, would we have got this bill if Trump was elected? Would have there been a third stimulus package? That's crazy. Like, if you really think about the power of voting, and like, we could have maybe not have this. And a lot of people want to complain about it, especially because like, everyone's like, look, life is fine. Things are getting back together. And I do agree, like, there's a lot of spending in here, but we have to understand, like, this is the largest federal response to a downturn in a very long time. And like, what you're also seeing, though, is just like economically pitting money in people's pockets is a good thing for the economy, which I think is just going to soar back, right? Once, you know, we all get back and Biden said July 4th, he gave it Independence Day where we're all get our independence back. And but he really didn't oversell it. He was just like, by July 4th, we could have small gatherings again. He kind of very downplayed it, but I can't imagine us not being able to have a normal July 4th just based off of the rate of vaccinations, how many we're having. People are getting vaccinated easier. Like, more of my friends are getting vaccinated. So I think that's kind of big that like, I do can see like the waste on like, why do we need more for COVID when it looks like Operation COVID is going well and it's like exceeding, but it's like now we're putting money in people's pocket. And like, I saw this right here in the Washington Post that economists estimate the boost will growth this year to the highest levels in decades and reduce the number of Americans living in poverty by a third, which I think that's what's the power of this bill, is that it's not just getting over a recession, but it's setting up people's success for post-recession.
Right. And I think that is something that I too wanted to focus on here, where so much of this is on the macro level. And when you start talking about things like billions of dollars, I'll be honest, my brain doesn't comprehend it. I don't understand $100 billion. I don't understand all of the ins and the outs of how it's going to be spent. And like, so I value these questions that are being asked by our elected officials because these questions seem legitimate and they seem fair. But to your point, it's individuals who I think are going to benefit directly and immediately, because despite, you know, some of us were fortunate enough, myself included in this, to be able to work from home. And yes, you know, there might have been some income gaps or changes, but, you know, for the most part, I was in a fortunate position. But for a lot of people, they might be behind on rent, car payments, paying off consumer debt, student loan payments. Like, those things are going to come creeping back up. And I think it's great that we're finding a way to put money in their pockets, allow them to, if not get ahead, at least get back to zero or closer to that like kind of even keel that they might have been feeling in February of 2020. And so we can forge ahead, right? So if you're one of those people who's going to benefit from it directly, fantastic. You know, I'm happy for you. I'm excited for you. And if you're someone who is in a position to, and these funds are going to be something that you can use to help your community or help the people around you, then I hope you do that. So I think it's good all around.
Yeah. And what's also cool is like, I'm even looking at more of that data here. It's around that the 1.9 trillion stimulus package could see the U.S. economy outpace China for the first time in 45 years. So like, this is going to, this injection of cash is going to people, and people are going to spend it. And so it's also good for companies. But these people are going to spend these stimulus packages because they have to. Maybe it's to fix their car. Maybe it's to fix something, you know, in their house. A bill that they've been holding on to go into the doctor, or, you know, because of COVID. So they haven't been able to go into doctor's offices. Right. This money is going to free up people to do the things they need to do and stimulate the economy.
Yeah, I hope so. You know, time will tell. We will see. I think that when things like this happen, what is so difficult to do is look back and reflect on what the long-term implications of something like this are. Because what do we know about news? Man, it just keeps on coming. It just keeps on coming. And this thing it's crazy to think about it, but in a year, this thing might be buried and we won't even be thinking about, well, how did that turn out? And what were the results of that? I hope we're still thinking about it. I hope we ask those questions down the road.
Well, now, as we get ready for Mattie Parker's interview, I do want to hit some highlights on just like current local election updates. And so we recorded Mattie's interview on Thursday. something to note is that on Wednesday, the Art Council hosted a Fort Worth Mayoral Candidates panel about arts and culture. I watched the whole thing. It was an hour and a half program, and it included even like the sleeper candidates, which were pretty interesting. There's this guy named Daniel, who's an interesting fella. He was a former educator, but he actually was. He just grew on me of a guy that like, man, this guy is just like. He was wearing a shirt that it was like a freedom shirt. He had a white T-shirt on. It was a freedom shirt, and it had like an eagle and then the American flag. And it was just like he became my fan favorite of the panel. And there was another guy on there, Cedric Chaba Kayenda. He was super kind of new as well. He did his interview in his car. Steve Panate was on the interview as well. So these are the first time I heard of these people and got to see them go out. So shout out to the Arts Council for making it equitable and allowing everybody equal amount of time to present. Deborah, in my mind, probably rocked it out of everyone. And Deborah's energy and excitement, and you could just tell she's invested in the arts. That came off pretty evident of all the experience when she was talking. She had very strong answers. And Zeta was also like in the arts, had a lot of strong answers. But besides that, I just wanted to update everybody about that. And also, we're going to have another panel coming up in April 14th. This one's going to be run by the Fort Worth Chamber, and it's going to be to discuss the economic vision of Fort Worth. So this one's going to be more tactful, I think, and more excited for like the business hat of people. So you can watch the art one if you wanted to watch and explore all the candidates at www.facebook.com/artsfortworth. It's recorded. You can watch it. And then this one is going to be scheduled at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. April 14th. And the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, the Fort Worth Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and the Fort Worth Metropolitan Bank Chamber of Commerce have teamed up to host this forum where you're going to also have the candidates. So check that out. So our interview with Mattie is coming right now, and it's probably going to be a highlight of what she'll be talking about there.
Alrighty, y'all. Well, so let's get into this interview with Mattie Parker. Mattie Parker is the founding CEO of Fort Worth Cradle to Career and the Tarrant to and Through T3 partnership, which aims to ensure more students have the training needed to thrive in today's workforce. Mattie spent 5 years as chief of staff for the Fort Worth Mayor and City Council, where she led successful efforts to improve efficacy at City Hall. She serves on the board of directors for the Gatehouse's Legacy Early Learning Academy, Read Fort Worth, Operation Progress Fort Worth, and the ACH Child and Family Services. Mattie and her husband David have one daughter and two sons. She graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with a Bachelor of Arts in Government and has a law degree from Texas A&M University School of Law, where she was awarded the prestigious McLean and Balware Endowed Law Scholarship.
I was born in Austin and raised in the booming metropolis of Hyco, Texas. Not sure if I've ever been there before, on my family's farm. And I went to University of Texas for undergrad, met my husband. Dave's about 6.5 years older than me. We met at the Capitol. And because of his job, we ended up moving from Austin to Fort Worth. And admittedly, guys, I think we thought we'd go back to Austin, right? We got here, we're like, we can't even find a brunch spot. It was a sleepy town. There was not much going on. This is pre-kids. And slowly the city just started growing on us. And that's when I kind of made the decision, like, we want to live here. Let's put roots down, invest in the people. And I have to say, the folks here were so welcoming to us. We were young. I mean, I think I was 24, 25. I hadn't even gone to law school yet, had no idea what I wanted to do. And some folks in this community just really invested in us in a couple and wanted us to be successful. And it's been so fun to watch the last 14 years how we've grown and flourished and been successful. I mean, it's not perfect, right? There's a few things I'm sure we'll get into today that we think were holding us back. But all in all, I think that this community is poised to be just this tremendous catalyst for growth and opportunity. And so we've just decided to call it home, which is really special.
Love it. Well, I know so me and Tony both, I work with Student Success Agency, which privileged to have a partnership with T3.
Absolutely.
And actually, have a presentation with some seniors right after this with Mr. Stafford. So really excited.
I know, it's great.
And then we have Tony as well with Urban Teachers, who out of Dallas, but does a lot of teacher recruitment. So I would love to know, like, how'd you get into education and get into that space with Fort Worth, and where do you see us needing to grow in the education space in Fort Worth?
Oh, such a good question. So I truly feel like if you want to be in public service, if you want to care about your community, you have to start with education. you guys already know this because that's why you're part of T3. But in Tarrant County, only 23% of our students ever make it to a 2-year or 4-year credential. And if you check it, you look at students' economic status, our kiddos that are growing up in a low-income household, only 14% of them make it. And that is unacceptable. And so when I was still at City Hall as Chief of Staff for Mayor and Council, I had the privilege of traveling with a group of people across the country to see what was happening in what I consider education disruption, like what is working to provide better education for all students. And we came up with what is now called the T3 partnership. And honestly, what I love about SSA and what you guys have provided, because you are disruptors, you are doing things differently to provide what we think students need, which is a connection to real life experience and people that have lived through what they're going through, right? And it's a lot easier for a student that's in college that's a little cooler than for you and I to connect with a kid. And I am just optimistic about it. I think for Tarrant County and Fort Worth is a high growth area, and we talk a lot about economic development. And we at T3 believe student success is our success. And we have tried to drill down, and it's working in our business community to make them recognize we have to invest in the talent that sits in classrooms today if we're going to have long-term success and opportunity in this community. You can import all day long, right? You can bring the next amazing Amazon story to Fort Worth. But if you don't take care of our homegrown kids, we're in serious trouble. And the economic disparities that exist, our opportunity, the zip codes that are in worse situations, education is the answer. So a long answer to your question is it's the right thing to do. I got so inspired by some of the work we were doing that when I had the opportunity to leave City Hall and start Cradle to Career in T3, I said, heck yeah, let's go for it, right? And we've managed to build this amazing organization and start serving students in the middle of COVID. So we are really excited about finishing out this school year with our scholars and then focusing on next year.
Love it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And like EJ said, I work in the ed prep space, so work for an EPP,
Okay.
urban teachers. Also on your website, you talked about, the classrooms of excellence. What do classrooms of excellence look like? I'm curious. Or if T3 has, an idea of what those classrooms might look like.
Well, as a parent of 3 children, any parent would tell you every kid is different. And so a classroom of excellence meets the needs of all students and allowing parents to determine what is working best for their kid. There's this thing that's happening across the country where pitting parents and families against each other because of the choice they make in education, right? Do they choose charter? Do they choose private? Do they choose homeschool? Are they potting this year because schools weren't open? Are they in a traditional public school? Are they at Alice Carlson in applied learning? Like all the different opportunities. But we have to recognize there are families in our city today that don't have a choice, right? And they might have 2 kids where the classroom of excellence is the public school down the street. It is working for them and that child. But for their second child, it's not working. And I think as a parent, that would be the most debilitating feeling to know I'm not able to provide what my child needs based on whatever whatever problem they're facing, right? Or if they have a learning disability, or if maybe there's a social aspect that's not working. So classrooms of excellence to me are turning to the experts, turning to the educators that are in the field and saying, what is working for your students? Do you specialize in a certain population of student? Are we recognizing that some students don't learn virtually, some can learn virtually? All these different aspects. You will never hear me say to a parent, you've made the wrong choice, right? Because it's a deeply personal decision. We've bounced around before for our own kids, trying to make sure they were protected and felt like they were really learning at the best of their ability. So classrooms of excellence to me is meeting students' needs where they are and recognizing it's not going to be the same classroom for every student. And as a city of over 900,000 people, it should look different, right, across the community. But recognizing that every parent right now doesn't feel like they can meet the needs of their kids for a variety of reasons. And I don't want to stop until we've done that, till every parent, no matter their circumstances, feels like, yeah, my kid has a choice and I can help them get where they need to be.
Yeah. And I think with the education piece here, I think as we look at our conversation with Robert Stearns was around like this idea of, and this is going to now kind of transition into from the 2 things I think I'm most interested in when it comes to our mayoral candidates. And that's obviously education and equity, but then as well as entrepreneurship. And so with Robert, we kind of talked about, and Cameron Cushman with Sparkyard around how do we recruit talent? And I feel like education allows people who are looking for a better education for their kids. That's going to be a high priority. But how do you see us bringing in talent while also building up our talent, as Fort Worth is the 13th, 14th biggest city. But when you search Google, Fort Lauderdale comes up before Fort Worth. Albuquerque, New Mexico is investing in startups more money than Fort Worth, Texas. Omaha, Nebraska is investing in startups better than Fort Worth, Texas. So how do you see both plays from building up our kids today and through the education system, but then also recruiting knowledge-based workers who have 21st century skills to tell them that Fort Worth is a great place to work from home? Not only work from home if you work for a large company, but also if your company allows you to work from anywhere. How do we get those people to choose Fort Worth?
Absolutely. So, oh gosh, I could tackle this from a lot of angles. Let's first take entrepreneurship innovation. In Fort Worth, Texas, we have to recognize we are competing on a global scale. We no longer need to turn to Dallas and say, oh, what are they doing? We need to compete with them, or Frisco, Plano. It is a global economy thanks to technology, and let's adapt to that. As far as entrepreneurship goes and innovation, I actually got to participate yesterday in a conversation that Cameron hosted on the new Clubhouse app or social media, whatever we're calling that, right? It was a conversation about entrepreneurship in Fort Worth and what's missing. And the topic of an accelerator came. We don't have an accelerator that works for our workforce. You know, some people think you need 8 accelerators based on our population. The entrepreneur that was talking yesterday said, actually, let's just supercharge one fantastic accelerator that serves multitude of industries. You've got Tech Fort Worth, right? That needs to be on steroids. I would love to see what Hayden is doing at Tech Fort Worth and infuse that into City Hall, elevate the importance of what Tech Fort Worth does. I've had coffee with Elise Dickerson at ESR and understood her story of starting her startup. You know, tons of business experience, she and her partner, but they still needed Tech Fort Worth to get started. We need to recognize and support entrepreneurs. You mentioned attracting talent. Look what Bentonville is doing right now, or what Tulsa has done in the past. These really disruptive ways of doing business to bring talent into your community, because I really do think if you build it, they will come. Look at Miami right now, and the mayor of Miami is doing. He constantly is tweeting and disrupting Bitcoin for his employees and other things that are happening. That now is becoming a tech hub. And I don't think we need to be Miami or Bentonville or Tulsa. We need to be Fort Worth, Texas. But we're not casting a vision and selling our story. And we have all the tenets to do it, right? We have fantastic stories like yourself, right, of what's happening in entrepreneurship in Fort Worth. And we're just not telling it clearly. So I think there's some momentum there that we really can build upon. And I know it will be a tenet of my administration as mayor, because I think that's what will make us stronger. And then at the same time, what's cool about that is it's a balance, right? You're on parallel paths. You're talking about attracting talent, but you're investing in the current talent that's already here. So you have a workforce pipeline. And in our work at T3 and talking to employers, just simply knowing there are smart people and investors working in this space to make sure we have a better pipeline is making them feel more comfortable, right? To know there's a plan. No one needs perfection. They need to know that you acknowledge there's a problem and we're dealing with it, because every major city in the country is dealing with urban education, as you know, right? And so I think if Fort Worth is smart, we can run those parallel paths and absolutely have a plan. And the last thing I'll say is I don't have all the answers, right? But bringing people to the table that have never been tapped, that are incredible entrepreneurs, very successful, maybe they've turned over 2 or 3 companies, and understanding what their success looks like. And then lastly, what are the technologies and the economy of the future? Are we looking 5 years out, 6 years out, to making sure Fort Worth is poised to be that next great American city and not be left behind?
Yeah, I think that EJ and I spend a lot of time talking about that just between the two of us is, you know, how do we make sure that Fort Worth maintains that identity that we all love? And it's what attracts people here. And once they're here, they're like, oh, I get it. They may not know it from the outside looking in. Yeah. But we are also very concerned about, but how do we not get forgotten? And, you know, like to your point of not being a global, needing to think globally and not thinking about our friends down 30, how do you think we change that mindset? Like, and what is the mayor's role in changing the mindset of people who are in Fort Worth and want it to maybe stay the same?
Well, I think there's fear in the unknown, right? If you've got legacy Fort Worthians that have been here for generations and they want to keep it special, you need to comfort them and understanding that we're going to hold on to the heritage of Fort Worth, right? We're going to make sure we maintain what makes us special, but we can also move forward, right? I use the analogy a lot and maybe because I ran track in high school, but it feels like we're in the starting blocks, the gun goes off, and Fort Worth just kind of looks around like, who's next? Who's going to go, right? And we're just slow out of the gate so many times, and we've got to change that. One thing I would love to do as mayor is in those first few months taking office is go on a roadshow across the city and create a shared unified vision, mission, values, the same thing you do in your own companies, about who we are as a community, and cast that wide and clear that is collectively created by a variety of different people, so that when people are moving here, we say, welcome, let me tell you about Fort Worth, Texas, right? Or to a business, let me tell you about why you want to come to Fort Worth. And I think that those things will help those people that have that fear factor, right? Ensure that we maintain that small town aspect that we all love, but also recognizing that now, no, actually, we're going to be, a top 12 American city. And if we want to stay on the map and not be a bedroom community of another city, then we've got to act fast. And I think that with that, the mayor's responsibility is absolutely to be the ambassador, but also not be all things to all people, and recognize there are fantastic talent across the city that need to be tapped. People like yourselves, right? That you understand, you talk about these things, and no one's ever asked you before, like, hey, let's step up. Like, let's take another delegation to Kansas City again, or to Cleveland, and go on this road show about what the city of Fort Worth is doing.
Yeah. What do you think that, obviously, like, if you look at it, it's like San Francisco, New York, Austin, and now like this little kind of Miami came out of nowhere, with really zero budget and just all hustle. And what did you think that, like, what makes, I also think there's this opportunity of like being different than Austin that will really sell Fort Worth. Me and you, I think, and several people, when we were looking at Austin as a place to live, like pretty much everyone else in the country, but we chose Fort Worth. And I think, like, what do you think some of the messaging and the things that make us different than Austin, but still relevant in the 21st century?
Yeah, well, let's start with the basics, right? So cost of living, congestion, change of the fabric of the city, all those things are already there in Austin that we compete with every day. And we have a much higher quality of life. Try raising a kid in Austin, Texas right now. Like, I have close girlfriends who are like, it's impossible to get into a school or to navigate, or all those things that are happening. So those are the fundamentals that make us different than Austin. But again, embrace the things that are unique about Fort Worth. So let's talk about some things that do separate us. Look about our deep roots in art and culture, right? Starting with the culture district, we have world-class museums, but because of that, you've created this ecosystem of artists and creatives in film, in film and music and food that continues to grow. And I think it's fantastic. I told the group yesterday on Arts Council, one of my favorite memories in the last year, right before COVID, is my husband and I went with a group of friends to Twilight Lounge, and the Squeeze Box Bandits were playing. And I looked up at one point and, like, it was a crowded dance floor. There were all these fantastic people from all walks of life. That is Fort Worth, Texas, right? And just telling that story. Sometimes we shy away from Cowtown a bit. We need to embrace it when it works for us. And I use this on the Fortitude podcast, but did you know that the horse industry in the United States is a $122 billion industry? It is 12 times the size of the NFL, right? We need to use it when it works. And if that gets us in the door of other people, because if we're talking about certain aspects of Fort Worth, the historic stockyards, no one else has that, right? And that doesn't mean we're only Cowtown. I had this visual thinking about Simplify, that's now headquarters in the stockyards, right? The tech data guy on his laptop in the middle of the herd drive. So I think all those things make Fort Worth really unique. And I'm saying things, there are groups of people thinking about this. The chambers at Green are on a new marketing campaign. Look at what Mitch Whitten and that team has done at Visit Fort Worth. Tremendous work for tourism. Let's just keep doing more of that, right? To tell the Fort Worth story.
What is, you mentioned track and passing, like, being in a relay. I know you got endorsed by Betsy Price. And what is, I think a lot of maybe what's something that is going to be different or unique that maybe you're going to bring that's maybe different and fresh than Betsy may have, just simply because of different timing, different generation. What do you see some opportunities for you to kind of create your own leadership in Fort Worth?
Well, you mentioned a few of them. Obviously, Betsy and I are a different generation that will make us different, of course. I mean, I was very fortunate to work alongside Mayor Price and City Council for those 5 years, and watching our pitfalls, watching things we did successfully, how we worked together, how we didn't. And those are all things that will inform how I lead. But I'll have my own style, right? We're very different people, our own personalities. And no matter who is running for mayor, no one needs to be the next Betsy 2.0, right? Everybody needs to identify, because Betsy is such a unique, incredible ambassador for the city, has done tremendous work. But no matter who's mayor next, they're going to have their differences. For me, I think because I've grown up behind the scenes, right, for 17 years, jokingly, I'm the one that was usually trying to duck behind the picture and then get back to writing the speech. Sometimes I have to get myself out of the weeds because I'm the policy wonk. Like, I know all the things that have happened, but I recognize that it's a different role when you need to communicate to constituencies and you're the face of the city. I think in addition to that, I had the unique ability from city management, working with council members, working with the mayor, working with the community, of being a really good problem solver, right? And that's really what mayors are. They are on the ground, grassroots, solving problems for constituents. You'll hear me talk a lot about keeping Washington-style politics out of this election. That's really important to me. That's not a strategy to win. That's who I am. And if I'm going to live here and raise my kids here after this election, no matter what happens, I want to bring people together. And I think this city, for Betsy specifically, for 10 years, we had a steady hand of leadership, and that's remarkable. That is a huge sacrifice that she made for this city. And so whomever takes over that seat needs to recognize it is an incredibly hard job, right? Every council member has a hard job, but especially the mayor. And I go into it eyes wide open, ready to listen, ready to understand this turning point. And I wouldn't be doing it, right, if I didn't get really excited about what it meant for Fort Worth and the opportunity we have. And I think the proverbial passing of the torch, right? I'm 37 years old. And I don't know the average of our elected officials. It's not about ageism. It's just about an opportunity. And I've had some people say, well, you're too young, right? Or you're a mom of young kids. And I think it all is an asset. I mean, I've met so many CEOs and founders of their companies that are 10 years younger than me, killing it in Fort Worth, right? So I think it's an asset for our city to look up and say, hey, we've got, a new generation of leadership that can pay homage and to respect our heritage and our history, but also take us forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, kudos to you for seeing those things as assets, because I think that makes you, to your point, that does make you a better leader. That makes you way more able to level with the voters and level with people who it's like, hey, I get it. Like, I'm thinking about those things just like you're thinking about those things. So I do appreciate you saying that. In that, and I feel bad. I feel like this might put you on the spot a little bit, but you said like you spent 5 years working with city council, working with Mayor Price. What do you think are two lessons? What was maybe the one absolute, like, this is the thing that I learned that I will continue to do, and that was the biggest learning I had? And then what is the one thing that you learned and you were like, we cannot do this going forward?
Good questions. We mishandled as a city the incident that happened to Jacqueline Craig and her family, both during and after, and we continue to deal with that decision. And we could unpack that whole thing in a variety of ways, but it was really messy. And I have a lot of regret about that. For one, having been there, right? And then as a community, I think that incident reflects, and this is in no disrespect to Chief Fitzgerald, who was our chief at the time. But I think if you fast forward to now and a learning from that, I have this huge faith in Chief Neil Noakes to lead the department into the future and lead with a servant's heart. Continue what Ed Krause started, recognizing that policing must be different for this community to restore faith and trust in our community between our police officers and all community members. I quite frankly don't know that I would be running if I didn't know that Noakes was the right man for the job. And whoever is mayor is going to benefit so much from his leadership because he gets it, right? He cares so deeply about this city. So one aspect that I know I wish we'd done differently, right? And wouldn't want to repeat that again. Things that I'm proud of for this city that I want to continue is this council, even if they're different, even if they sometimes don't agree, we are always civil. And they really do work hard to continue to be friends with one another, to work together where they can. Things are messy sometimes, of course, and that may play out from the dais. But for the most part, we are a model city when it comes to good governance. We're about to add 2 additional council members with redistricting. So with intention, we can absolutely maintain that continuity of leadership, which I can't wait to do, and feel most poised and prepared to do that, because oftentimes I was behind the scenes whip counting, right? Understanding where council members were, knowing their perspective, because at the end of the day, everybody gets one vote. The mayor gets the same amount of power on a vote as any other council member. And so their positions on behalf of their constituents matter. But we need to walk away being able to look at each other and say, I respect your opinion, right? And that's how we build consensus. It's different than it is in Austin at the Capitol or in DC. And we need to keep it that way in Fort Worth.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time and giving us the time to discuss and talk with you. Next time we can just talk education with a cup of coffee at your coffee shop of choice. But I really appreciate you just taking the time to be on the pod. Any last things you want to say or where people can find you or support the cause?
Sure. It's mattieformayor.com, MATTIESOR mayor.com. I'm on all the social media channels, of course, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and now Clubhouse. I'm learning that one. And just appreciate the time. I think communication, the way we reach people in the city needs to improve. And I love the fact there are these podcasts out there to reach people where they are. I think you're going to find additional followers continue to grow in spades because people are hungry for this kind of information, and podcast is the way of the future. As a mayor, I would love to have my own podcast. Nothing long, like let's just catch up, understand what's going on Tuesday so people feel informed. So appreciate what y'all are doing very much.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you, Mattie.
Thank you.
Y'all take care. Bye-bye, guys.
Take care.
Well, that was Mattie Parker.
Right on, man.
She did great.
Yeah, she's great to talk to. She is clearly someone who is like poised and ready. And I think I really appreciate anybody who you get into a room and look, she's going from one thing to another. I jumped into this meeting room. We threw these weren't softballs, I don't think. We threw some good questions at her and she was poised, ready to go, informed, passionate. You know, you can't, I know listeners, you won't be able to see her face and see her passion, but man, she is passionate about what she's talking about.
Yeah. I mean, she definitely has the energy. And I mean, she was hitting all the words when it comes to entrepreneurship and being aware of that, being aware of Miami, being aware of the things that are happening. That definitely was like super awesome. And then I think like how she talked about it as a mother dealing with the education piece. Mm-hmm. I thought that was clear. And I feel like people could understand that. It really brought it home for me how she's thinking through that. And I think thinking through that lens as a mother who understood having to make different decisions, I think will make for great leader, which is why I'm also I think a fan of having a woman mayor in Fort Worth. I'm definitely advocate for that. But what were some of your high points?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, being in education myself, I really liked the way that she talked about it, turning to educators, asking educators like what's actually working, what is not working. Her ideas around the classroom of excellence is about meeting people where they are. Yeah, we've got to find more leaders across the board, right? Not just in our schools, but also in government elected positions who are ready to kind of divorce themselves from this, like school opens at 7, closes at 3. It serves this purpose. People go home. That's it. So I really like that she's thinking about that from both an educator and a parent's perspective. One of my big takeaways was like, look, Fort Worth, stop looking at Dallas. Stop competing with Dallas.
Yeah.
You know, this is a global competition. And if your biggest concern is what's happening 40 miles east of here in Dallas, you're not thinking big enough.
Yeah.
So I was 100% on board with that statement.
Yeah. And I think what I also liked about it was how she said, pay homage to the heritage. I thought that was good. I think that's what like generational Fort Worthians are looking for, that, you know, we don't California, they're Texas in a way. And I think she hits that well. I thought like that was, I feel like, because I think regardless how this pans out, we were talking about who's going to end up on the runoff, right? And I think you obviously have Dr. Bird, which we're seeing a tons of signs, but realize he has at minimum probably 5 times more money than anyone else. So just realize like he's not necessarily the voice of the people. He's just financially backed. But I feel like he is super like, right, the evangelical, the conservative, government needs to become more efficient. And he is definitely riling up the people on his side. And then you have like Mattie, who has like some strong endorsements. Our mayor, who we loved, right? Betsy Price. She has a lot of the endorsements from people who are wealthy, the Bass family. And then you have Ann Zeta and Deborah Peoples on the other side. And I'm just really interested to see how it's going to pan out for the runoff.
Yeah.
And I wonder how how this is gonna play.
I think that we're lucky to live in a city where we have an election that, for the most part, looks like the people who are that live in the city, right? Like, we have an election that looks like the people who live here. I think that you can find, regardless of who you align with, like, you're going to find someone that you align with in this election. And that is an indication that we live in a major city where people are excited about being in a leadership role. And that's important. And it's a blessing to be in a city where we have those kinds of opportunities where we get to look at it and be like, hey, I'm not stuck with one or the other. I got a choice here, and that choice, and I can make sure, if you're listening to podcasts like this, or if you're listening to podcasts like so many others that are in the area, you're reading multiple news sources, you have an opportunity to really learn about the candidate. And it's not just a blind, well, I saw a bunch of signs, so I voted for who I saw on the sign. Don't do that.
Yeah. And then, and I was, again, disclosure here, like, I know, like, from maybe like a logical business choice, like, student success agency having, Mattie being there would make sense for me to, say, oh, Mattie's it for me. I think for me, like, I feel privileged that I think Fort Worth has a lot of, like, great people in different ways. And I am really struggling between Ann Zeta, Deborah Peoples, and Mattie Parker. Like, I'm very open on that on the show. And I hope that when we have this conversation, like when we're on this podcast, we don't hide from tough conversations and just say, be happy. We actually have the tough conversations and try to navigate through this and be hopefully as unbiased as possible and be self-aware of those biases. And so I'm really torn because I feel Ann Zeta is truly the most bipartisan of everybody. So really, truly the most independent. I feel Mattie's the most capable for the entrepreneurial spirit. But I also believe, like, Deborah Peoples is the best for equity. And, like, we are a diverse minority city, majority minority city. And I don't think anyone understands that better than her. And so I'm very torn. But I think what I hope most is that if you're someone who maybe has more conservative Republican views, like, you just pick Mattie over Dr. Bird. That's probably the only thing I would like to happen. But besides that, like, I'm just really excited for the runoff and what happens, there. And I'm going to support whoever, if it's either of those three women right now for me, like, I'm standing up and fired up for.
Yep, I think ladies, it's ladies' choice right now. There's a lot of strong women running for office. I'm excited about each of them. Like you, I'm torn. I don't have any reason to say that I'm not. I'm torn. I'm interested. Like I said in our last episode, the last time you and I got to talk, I'm really interested to see what more we learn, what more we find out in the coming weeks. These people are who they are. They're doing the things that they're doing. I think I agree that the more you hear from someone, the more likely they are to really reveal themselves. The pressure turns up, it starts getting closer, and we're going to get to start to see the real deal. I think we got the real deal for Mattie, and she's making it a hard choice. I'll say that. No,
and then what's cool, I mean, what I'm going to also hit here though is, before coming on this, literally yesterday, she got the endorsement from the police association, I believe. That's right. And they had a little setup. I know the Star Telegram reported on it. She got the endorsement from the police association, and there was words about defunding the police, and she took a picture with police, and I was like, oh dang, like for me, right? Like, I feel like like those are kind of things, like taking pictures with the police, and like in some people's eyes is like taking pictures with, protesters for defund the police, right? Like it's kind of a sensitive subject. So I was like really kind of torn there. But then when she mentioned Chief Noakes, and I think where I feel like the Black and brown community that I talk to respects Chief Noakes, it made it less of a dang. Like that was tough to see her like really like get the endorsement of the police association, because personally, I feel like the police association has been majority sketch through this whole system and not being more empathetic and thoughtful through what the community really wants. So I don't know. I felt like that was a good opener where she led with Chief Noakes in that conversation, because I think how she feels about him was really strong. That was powerful.
Yeah, I thought that the endorsement of Noakes was an important one for anybody, right? And I'm glad. I mean, it was pretty incredible too that she said, "I'm not sure that I would be running if he wasn't the chief of police." that is saying something, right? Because that is something that the mayor, like, they have to be able to work hand in hand. And I've never really thought about it, but it's like, hey, you need to know who you're going to get, because if that is going to make your life harder or more difficult, this may not be the time to do it. And she said, you're the guy. I'm excited to run with you. That's important, right? So I'm sure that Chief Noakes had something to do with the Police Officers Association being like, hey, y'all, might be the right way to go. In the terms of policing, what a hot button issue. I will just say this. She said, music to my ears. We didn't get into it. Time just flies on this thing. But she said that policing must be different in the city. And I think that's important, right? It's the same thing I would say about education. It's the same thing I would say about teaching. It's the same thing I would say about our views on entrepreneurship and starting new businesses. It has to be different. In some ways, different is better. In some ways, it's a change. And that's okay. Like, that is the point of being in a major city that is thinking progressively, that is trying to be a global competitor. We have to do things differently.
Yeah, if we would have had more time, I would have loved to know what she meant between Washington politics. I feel like it would be like, what do you mean like that? Like, because I guess, what does Washington politics different than Fort Worth politics? I guess like local politics.
Yeah, she hinted at it a little bit with like saying about like, well, she didn't hint at it. She said directly like the council is always civil. I think that's important.
Yeah.
People got to get along, and this idea of like even what we saw right in the COVID relief, the newest stimulus package that came out, where it was just like, people on this side of the aisle said this, people on this side of the aisle said that, and that's what it is. A city council is not allowed to do that. There's only 9 of you, and we need, like, you got to continue to work together, or, it's going to be 11 of them. So I do think that that's important. I think it's what makes Fort Worth special, right? Where it's
Absolutely.
like, you don't have to see eye to eye with every single person on every single thing, but at the end of the day, like, we can get along, we can brush shoulders, we can go to Twilight, like she mentioned, and have a drink and listen to some
how
good
I missed
music.
going to Twilight with you.
God.
In the wives.
Oh my God. I miss it so much. Going out anywhere, really?
Yeah. Well, that was Mattie Parker, guys. Thank you for being listening to the pod with us. I felt that was really helpful. Really excited to see how people listen to it again. Realize that, I'm going to say this over and over again, only 1.1% of people between 18 and 34 years old voted in the 2017 mayoral election. The average age of someone who voted was 66 years old in 2017. The average age of a Fort Worthian who can vote is 41. People, get your friends out there voting starting April 19th. Make it happen.